Very few students of occultism know anything at all about the fountainhead whence their tradition springs. Many of them do not even know there is a Western tradition. Scholarship is baffled by the intentional blinds and defenses with which initiates both ancient and modern have wrapped themselves about, and concludes that the few fragments of literature which have come down to us are medieval forgeries. They would be greatly surprised if they knew that these fragments, supplemented by manuscripts that have never been allowed to pass out of the hands of initiates and completed by an oral tradition, are handed down in schools of initiation to this day, and are used as the basis of the practical work of the yoga of the West. The adepts of those races whose evolutionary destiny is to conquer the physical plane have evolved a yoga technique of their own which is adapted to their special problems and peculiar needs. This technique is based upon the well-known but little understood Kabbalah, the wisdom of Israel. It may be asked why it is that the Western nation should go to the Hebrew culture for their mystical tradition. The answer to this question will be readily understood by those who are acquainted with the esoteric theory concerning races and sub-races. Everything must have a source. Cultures do not spring out of nothing. The seed bearers of each new phase of culture must of necessity arise within the preceding culture. No one can deny that Judaism was the matrix of the European spiritual culture when they recall the fact that Jesus and Paul were both Jews. No race, except the Jewish race, could possibly have served as the stock upon which the new dispensation was to be grafted, because no other race was monotheistic. Pantheism and polytheism had had their day, and a new and more spiritual culture was due. The Christian races owe their religion to the Jewish culture, as surely as the Buddhist races of the East owe theirs to the Hindu culture. The mysticism of Israel supplies the foundation of modern Western occultism. It forms the theoretical basis upon which all ceremonial is developed. Its famous glyph, the Tree of Life, is the best meditation symbol we possess because it is the most comprehensive. It is not my intention to write a historical study of the sources of the Kabbalah, but rather to show the uses that are made of it by modern students of the mysteries. For although the roots of our system are in tradition, there is no reason why we should be hidebound by tradition. A technique that is being actually practiced is a growing thing, but the experience of each worker enriches it and becomes part of the common heritage. It is not necessarily incumbent upon us to do certain things or hold certain ideas because the rabbis who lived before Christ had certain views. The world has moved on since those days, and we are under a new dispensation, but what was true in principle then will be true in principle now, and of value to us. The modern Kabbalist is the heir of the ancient Kabbalist, but he must reinterpret doctrine and reformulate method in the light of the present dispensation if the heritage he has received is to be of any practical value to him. I do not claim that the modern Kabbalistic teachings as I have learned them are identical with those of the pre-Christian rabbis, but I claim that they are the legitimate descendants thereof and the natural development therefrom. The nearer the source, the purer the stream. In order to discover first principles, we must go to the fountainhead, but a river receives many tributaries in the course of its flow, and these need not necessarily be polluted. If we want to discover whether they are pure or not, we compare them with the pristine stream, and if they pass this test, they may well be permitted to mingle with the main body of waters and swell their strength. So it is with a tradition. That which is not antagonistic will be assimilated. We must always test the purity of a tradition by reference to first principles, but we shall equally judge of the vitality of a tradition by its power to assimilate. It is only a dead faith which remains uninfluenced by contemporary thought. The original stream of Hebraic mysticism has received many tributaries. We see its rise among the nomad star worshippers of Chaldea, where Abraham in his tent among his flocks hears the voice of God. But Abraham has a shadowy background in which vast forms move half seen. The mysterious figure of a great priest king, born without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. administers to him the first Eucharistic feast of bread and wine after the battle with the kings in the valley, the sinister kings of Edom, who ruled ere there was a king in Israel, whose kingdoms are unbalanced force. Generation by generation, we trace the intercourse of the princes of Israel with the priest kings of Egypt. Abraham and Jacob went thither. Joseph and Moses were intimately associated with the court of the royal adepts. When we read of Solomon sending to Hiram, king of Tyre, for men materials to aid in the building of the temple, we know that the famous Tyrian mysteries must have profoundly influenced the Hebrew esotericism. When we read of Daniel being educated in the palaces of Babylon, we know that the wisdom of the Magi must have been accessible to Hebrew Illuminati. This ancient mystical tradition of the Hebrews possessed three literatures: the books of the law and the prophets, which are known to us as the Old Testament, the Talmud, or collection of learned commentaries thereon, and the Kabbalah, or mystical interpretation thereof. Of these three, the ancient rabbis say that the first is the body of the tradition, the second its rational soul, and the third its immortal spirit. Ignorant men may with profit read the first, learned men study the second, but the wise meditate upon the third. It is a strange thing that Christian exegesis has never sought the keys to the Old Testament and the Kabbalah. In our Lord's day, there were three schools of religious thought in Palestine: the Pharisees and the Sadducees, of whom we read so frequently in the Gospels, and the Essenes, who are never referred to. Esoteric tradition avers that the boy Jesus ben Joseph, when his caliber was recognized by the learned doctors of the law who heard him speak in the temple at the age of 12, was sent by them to the Essene community near the Dead Sea to be trained in the mystical tradition of Israel, and that he remained there until he came to John to be baptized in the Jordan before commencing his mission at the age of 30. Be that as it may, the closing clause of the Lord's Prayer is pure Kabbalism. Malkuth, the kingdom, Had, the power, Netzach, the glory, form the basal triangle of the tree of life, with Yesod, the foundation, or receptacle of influences, as the central point. Whoever formulated that prayer knew his Kabbalah. Christianity had its esotericism in the Gnosis, which owed much to both Greek and Egyptian thought. In the system of Pythagoras, we see an adaptation of the Kabbalistic principles to Greek mysticism. The exoteric, state-organized section of the Christian church persecuted and stamped out the esoteric section, destroying every trace of its literature upon which it could lay hands and striving to eradicate the very memory of a gnosis from human history. It is recorded that the baths and bakehouses of Alexandria were fired for 6 months with the manuscripts from the Great Library. Very little remains to us of our spiritual heritage and the ancient wisdom. Everything that was above ground was swept away, and it is only with the excavation of ancient monuments the sands have swallowed that we are beginning to rediscover its fragments. It was not until the 15th century, when the power of the church was beginning to show signs of weakening, that men dared to commit to paper the traditional wisdom of Israel. Scholars assert that the Kabbalah is a medieval forgery due to the absence of a lineage of early manuscripts. However, those familiar with the workings of esoteric fraternities understand that a single glyph can convey an entire cosmogony and psychology, remaining incomprehensible to the uninitiated. These strange old charts could be handed on from generation to generation, their explanation being communicated verbally, and the true interpretation would never. When in doubt as to the explanation of some abstruse point, reference would be made to the sacred glyph, and meditation thereon would unfold what generations of meditation had ensouled therein. It is well known to mystics that if a man meditates upon a symbol around which certain ideas have been associated by past meditation, he will obtain access to those ideas, even if the glyph has never been elucidated to him by those who have received the oral tradition, by mouth to ear. The organized temporal force of the church availed to drive all rivals from the field and destroy their traces. We little know what seeds of mystical tradition sprang up only to be cut down during the Dark Ages, But mysticism is inherent in the human race. And although the church had destroyed all roots of tradition in her group soul, nevertheless, devout spirits within her fold rediscovered the technique of the soul's approach to God and developed a characteristic yoga of their own, closely akin to the Bhakti yoga of the East. The literature of Catholicism is rich in treatises on mystical theology, which reveal practical acquaintance with the higher states of consciousness, though a somewhat naive conception of the psychology thereof, thus revealing the poverty of a system which does not avail itself of the experience of tradition. The Bhakti Yoga of the Catholic Church is only suitable for those whose temperament is naturally devotional and who find their readiest expression in loving self-sacrifice. But it is not everybody who is of this type, and Christianity is unfortunate in not having any choice of systems to offer its aspirants. The East, being tolerant, is wise and has developed various yoga methods, each of which is pursued by its adherents to the exclusion of the others. And yet none would deny that the other methods are also paths to God for those to whom they are suited. In consequence of this deplorable limitation on the part of our theology, many Western aspirants take up Eastern methods. For those who are able to live in Eastern conditions and work under the immediate supervision of a guru, this may prove satisfactory, but it seldom gives good results when the various systems are pursued with no other guide than a book and under unmodified Western conditions. It is for this reason that I would recommend to the white races the traditional Western system, which is admirably adapted to their psychic constitution. It gives immediate results, and if done under proper supervision, not only does it not disturb the mental or physical equipoise, as happens with regrettable frequency when unsuitable systems are used, but it produces a unique vitality. It is this peculiar vitality of the adepts which led to the tradition of the elixir of life. I have known a number of people in my time who might justly be considered adepts, and I always been struck by that peculiar ageless vitality they all possessed. On the other hand, however, I can only endorse what all the gurus of the Eastern tradition have always averred, that any system of psycho-spiritual development can only be safely and adequately carried on under the personal supervision of an experienced teacher. For this reason, although I shall give in these pages the principles of the mystical Kabbalah, I do not consider it would be in anybody's interest to give the keys to its practice, even if by the terms of the obligation of my own initiation, I were not forbidden to do so. But, on the other hand, I do not consider it fair to the reader to introduce intentional blinds and misinformation, and to the best of my knowledge and belief, the information I give is accurate, even if incomplete. The 32 mystical paths of the concealed glory are ways of life, and those who want to unravel their secrets must tread them. As I myself was trained, so can anyone be trained who is willing to undergo the discipline, and I will gladly indicate the way to any earnest seeker. No student will ever make any progress in spiritual development who flits from system to system, first using some new thought affirmations, then some yoga breathing exercises and meditation postures, and following these by an attempt at the mystical methods of prayer. Each of these systems has its value, but that value can only be realized if the system is carried out in its entirety. They are the calisthenics of consciousness and aim at gradually developing the powers of the mind. The value does not lie in the prescribed exercises as ends in themselves, but in the powers that will be developed if they are persevered with. If we intend to take our occult studies seriously and make of them anything more than desultory light reading, we must choose our system and carry it out faithfully until we arrive, if not at its ultimate goal, at any rate at definite practical results and a permanent enhancement of consciousness. After this has been achieved, we may, not without advantage, experiment with the methods that have been developed upon other paths, and build up an eclectic technique and philosophy therefrom. But the student who sets out to be an eclectic before he has made himself an expert will never be anything more than a dabbler. Whoever has any practical experience of the different methods of spiritual development knows that the method must fit the temperament, and that it must also be adapted to the grade of development of the student. Westerners, especially such as prefer the occult to the mystic path, often come seeking initiation at a stage of spiritual development which an Eastern guru would consider exceedingly immature. Any method that is to be available for the West must have in its lower grades a technique which can be used as a stepping stone by these undeveloped students. To ask them to rise immediately to metaphysical heights is useless in the case of the great majority and prevents a start from being made. For a system of spiritual development to be applicable in the West, it must fulfill certain well-defined requirements. To begin with, its elementary technique must be such that it is readily grasped by minds that have in them nothing of the mystic. Secondly, the forces it brings to bear to stimulate the development of the higher aspects of consciousness must be sufficiently powerful and concentrated to penetrate the relatively dense vehicles of the average Westerner, who makes nothing whatever of subtle vibrations. Thirdly, as few Europeans, following a racial dharma of material development, have either the opportunity or the inclination to lead the life of a recluse, the forces employed must be handled in such a way that they can be made available during the brief periods that the modern man or woman can, at the commencement of the path, snatch from their daily avocations to give to the pursuit. They must, that is to say, be handled by a technique which enables them to be readily concentrated and equally readily dispersed. Because it is not possible to maintain these high psychic tensions while living the hard-driving life of the citizen of a European city, experience proves with unfailing regularity that the methods of psychic development which are effectual and satisfactory for the recluse produce neurotic conditions and breakdowns in the person who pursues them while compelled to endure the strain of modern life. So much the worse for modern life, some may say, and adduce this undeniable fact as an argument for modifying our Western ways of living. Far be it from me to maintain that our civilization is perfect, or that wisdom originated and will die with us. But it appears to me that if our karma, or destiny, has caused us to be incarnated in a body of a certain racial type and temperament, it may be concluded that that is the discipline and experience which the lords of karma consider we need in this incarnation, and that we shall not advance the cause of our evolution by avoiding or evading it. I have seen so many attempts at spiritual development that were simply evasions of life's problems that I am suspicious of any system which involves a breach with the group's soul of the race. Nor am I impressed by a dedication to the higher life which manifests itself by peculiarities of clothing and bearing, and by the manner of cutting, or omitting to cut, the hair. True spirituality never advertises itself. The racial dharma of the West is the conquest of dense matter. If this were realized, it would explain many problems in the relationships of West and East. In order that we may conquer dense matter and develop the concrete mind, we are endowed by our racial heritage with a particular type of physical body and nervous system, just as other races are endowed with other types. It is injudicious to apply to one type of psychophysical makeup the developing methods adapted to another. They will either fail to produce adequate results or produce unforeseen and possibly undesirable results. To say, this is not to condemn the Eastern methods, nor decry the Western Constitution, which is as God made it, but to reaffirm the old adage that one man's meat is another man's poison. The Dharma of the West differs from that of the East. Is it therefore desirable to try and implant Eastern ideals in a Westerner? Withdrawal from the earth plane is not his line of progress. The normal, healthy Westerner has no desire to escape from life. His urge is to conquer it and reduce it to order and harmony. It is only the pathological types who long to cease upon the midnight with no pain, to be free from the wheel of birth and death. The normal Western temperament demands life, more life. It is this concentration of life force that the Western occultist seeks in his operations. He does not try to escape from matter into spirit, leaving an unconquered country behind him to get on as best it may. He wants to bring the Godhead down into manhood and make divine law prevail, even in the kingdom of the shades. This is the root motive for the acquisition of occult powers upon the right-hand path, and explains why initiates do not abandon all for the mystic divine union, but cultivate a white magic. It is this white magic, which consists in the application of occult powers to spiritual ends, by means of which a large proportion of the training and development of the Western aspirant is carried out. I have seen something of a good many different systems, and in my opinion, the person who tries to dispense with ceremonial is working at a great disadvantage. Development by meditation alone is a slow process in the West, because the mind stuff upon which it has to work, and the mental atmosphere in which the work has to be done, are very resistant. The only purely meditative school of Western yoga is that of the Quakers, and I think that they would agree that their path is for the few. The Catholic Church combines mantra yoga with its bhakti yoga. It is by means of formula that the occultist selects and concentrates the forces he wishes to work with. These formulas are based upon the Kabbalistic tree of life, and whatever system he may be working, whether he be assuming the god forms of Egypt or evoking the inspiration of Iacchus with chant and dance, he has the diagram of the tree at the back of his mind. It is in the symbolism of the tree that Western initiates are drilled, and it supplies the essential ground plan of classification to which all other systems can be related. The ray upon which the Western aspirant works has manifested itself through many different cultures and developed a characteristic technique in each. The modern initiate works a synthetic system, sometimes using an Egyptian, a Greek, or even a Druidic method, for different methods are best suited for different purposes and conditions. In all cases, however, the operation he designs is strictly related to the paths of the tree of which he is a master. If he possesses the grade which corresponds to the Sephirah Netzach, he can work with the manifestation of the force of that aspect of the Godhead, distinguished by the Kabbalists by the name of Tetragrammaton Elohim, in whatever system he may select. In the Egyptian system, it will be the Isis of nature. In the Greek, Aphrodite. In the Nordic, Freya. In the Druidic, Caridwen. In other words, he possesses the powers of the sphere of Venus in whatever traditional system he may be using. Having attained a grade in one system, he has access to the equivalent grades of all the other systems of his tradition. But although he may use these other systems as occasion serves, experience proves that the Kabbalah supplies the best groundwork and the best system upon which to train a student before he begins to experiment with the pagan systems. The Kabbalah is essentially monotheistic. The potencies it classifies are always regarded as the messengers of God and not his fellow workers. This principle enforces the concept of a centralized government of the cosmos and of the grip of the divine law upon the whole of manifestation, a very necessary principle with which to imbue any student of the arcane forces. It is the purity, sanity, and clarity of the Kabbalistic concepts as resumed in the formula of the tree of life, which makes that glyph such an admirable one for the meditations that exalt consciousness and justify us in calling the Kabbalah the yoga of the West. Speaking of the method of the Kabbalah, one of the ancient rabbis says that an angel coming down to earth would have to take on human form in order to converse with men. The curious symbol system known to us as the Tree of Life is an attempt to reduce to diagrammatic form every force and factor in the manifested universe and the soul of man, to correlate them one to another and reveal them spread out as on a map so that the relative positions of each unit can be seen and the relations between them traced. In brief, the Tree of Life is a compendium of science, psychology, philosophy, and theology. The student of the Kabbalah goes to work in exactly the opposite way to the student of natural science. The latter builds up synthetic concepts, the former analyzes abstract concepts. It goes without saying, however, that before a concept can be analyzed, it must first be assembled. Someone must have thought out the principles that are resumed in the symbol, which is the object of meditation of the Kabbalist, who then were the first Kabbalists who built up the whole scheme. The rabbis are unanimous upon this point. They were angels. In other words, it was beings of another order of creation than humanity who gave the chosen people their Kabbalah. To the modern mind, this may seem as absurd a statement as the doctrine that babies are found under gooseberry bushes. But if we study the many mystical systems of comparative religion, we find that all the Illuminati are in agreement upon this point. All men and women who have had practical experience of the spiritual life tell us that they are taught by divine beings. We shall be very foolish if we altogether disregard such a cloud of witnesses, especially those of us who never have had any personal experience of the higher states of consciousness. There are some psychologists who will tell us that the angels of the Kabbalists and the gods and manas of other systems are our own repressed complexes. There are others with less limited outlook who will tell us that these divine beings are the latent capacities of our own higher selves. To the devotional mystic, this is not a point of any great moment. He gets his results, and that is all he cares about. But the philosophical mystic, in other words, the occultist, thinks the matter out and arrives at certain conclusions. These conclusions, however, can only be understood when we know what we mean by reality and have a clear line of demarcation between the subjective and the objective. Anyone who is trained in philosophical method knows that this is asking a good deal. The Indian schools of metaphysics have most elaborate and intricate systems of philosophy which attempt to define these ideas and render them thinkable. And though generations of seers have given their lives to the task, the concepts still remain so abstract that it is only after a long course of discipline, called yoga in the East, that the mind is able to apprehend them at all. The Kabbalist goes to work in a different way. He does not attempt to make the mind rise up on the wings of metaphysics into the rarefied air of abstract reality. He formulates a concrete symbol that the eye can see and lets it represent the abstract reality that no untrained human mind can grasp. It is exactly the same principle as algebra. Let x represent the unknown quantity, let y represent the half of x, and let z represent something we know. If we begin to experiment with y to find out its relation to z and in what proportions, it soon ceases to be entirely unknown. We have learned something at any rate about it, and if we are sufficiently skillful, we may in the end be able to express y in terms of z, and then we shall begin to understand. 10th, there are a great many symbols that are used as objects of meditation. The cross in Christendom, the god forms in the Egyptian system, phallic symbols in other faiths. These symbols are used by the uninitiated as a means of concentrating the mind and introducing into it certain thoughts, calling up certain associated ideas, and stimulating certain feelings. The initiate, however, uses a symbol system differently. He uses it as an algebra by means of which he will read the secrets of unknown potencies. In other words, he uses the symbol as a means of guiding thought out into the unseen and incomprehensible. And how does he do this? He does it by using a composite symbol. A symbol that is an unattached unit would not serve his purpose. In contemplating such a composite symbol as the tree of life, he observes that there are definite relations between its parts. There are some parts of which he knows something. There are others of which he can intuit something, or, more crudely, make a guess, reasoning from first principles. The mind leaps from one known to another known, and in so doing traverses certain distances. Metaphorically speaking, it is like a traveler in the desert who knows the situation of two oases and makes a forced march between them. He would never have dared to push out into the desert from the first oasis if he had not known the location of the second. But at the end of his journey, he not only knows much more about the characteristics of the second oasis, but he has also observed the country lying between them. Thus, making forced marches from oasis to oasis, backward and forwards across the desert, he gradually explores it. Nevertheless, the desert is incapable of supporting life. So it is with the Kabbalistic system of notation. The things it renders are unthinkable, and yet the mind, tracking from symbol to symbol, manages to think about them. And although we have to be content to see in a glass darkly, yet we have every reason to hope that ultimately we shall see face to face and know even as we are known. For the human mind grows by exercise, and that which was at first as unthinkable as mathematics to the child who cannot manage his sums finally comes within the range of our realization. By thinking about a thing, we build concepts of it. It is said that thought grew out of language, not language out of thought. What words are to thought? Symbols are to intuition. Curious as it may seem, the symbol precedes the elucidation. That is why we declare that the Kabbalah is a growing system, not a historic monument. There is more to be got out of the Kabbalistic symbols today than there was in the time of the old dispensation, because our mental content is richer in ideas. How much more, for instance, does the Sephira Yesod, wherein work the forces of growth and reproduction, mean to the biologist than to the ancient rabbi? Everything that has to do with growth and reproduction is resumed in the sphere of the moon. But this sphere, as represented upon the tree of life, is set about with paths leading to other Sephiroth. Therefore, the biological Kabbalist knows that there must be certain definite relationships between the forces subsumed in Yesod and those represented by the symbol S assigned to these paths. Brooding over these symbols, he gets glimpses of relationships that do not reveal themselves when the material aspect of things is considered. And when he comes to work these out in the material of his studies, he finds that therein are hidden important clues. And so upon the tree, one thing leads to another. Explanation of hidden causes arising out of the proportions and relations of the various individual symbols composing this mighty synthetic glyph. Each symbol, moreover, admits of interpretation upon the different planes, and through its astrological associations can be related to the gods of any pantheon, thus opening up vast new fields of implication in which the mind ranges endlessly, symbol leading on to symbol in an unbroken chain of associations, symbol confirming symbol as the many branching threads gather themselves together into a synthetic glyph once more, and each symbol capable of interpretation in terms of whatever plane the mind may be functioning upon. This mighty, all-embracing glyph of the soul of man and of the universe, by virtue of its logical association of symbols, evokes images in the mind, but these images are not randomly evolved, but follow along well-defined association tracks in the universal mind. The symbol of the tree is to the universal mind what the dream is to the individual ego. It is a glyph synthesized from subconsciousness to represent the hidden forces. The universe is really a thought form projected from the mind of God. The Kabbalistic tree might be likened to a dream picture arising from the subconsciousness of God and dramatizing the subconscious content of deity. In other words, if the universe is the conscious end product of the mental activity of the Logos, the tree is the symbolic representation of the raw material of the divine consciousness and of the processes whereby the universe came into being. But the tree applies not only to the macrocosm but to the microcosm, which, as all occultists realize, is a replica in miniature. It is for this reason that divination is possible. That little understood and much maligned art has for its philosophical basis the system of correspondences represented by symbols. The correspondences between the soul of man and the universe are not arbitrary, but arise out of developmental identities. Certain aspects of consciousness were developed in response to certain phases of evolution, and therefore embody the same principles. Consequently, they react to the same influences. A man's soul is like a lagoon connected with the sea by a submerged channel, although to all outward seeming it is landlocked. Nevertheless, its water level rises and falls with the tides of the sea because of the hidden connection. So it is with human consciousness. There is a subconscious connection between each individual soul and the world soul deep hidden in the most primitive depths of subconsciousness. And in consequence, We share in the rise and fall of the cosmic tides. Each symbol upon the tree represents a cosmic force or factor. When the mind concentrates upon it, it comes into touch with that force. In other words, a surface channel, a channel in consciousness, has been made between the conscious mind of the individual and a particular factor in the world's soul. And through this channel, the waters of the ocean pour into the lagoon. The aspirant, who uses the tree as his meditation symbol, establishes point by point the union between his soul and the world soul. This results in a tremendous access of energy to the individual soul. It is this which endows it with magical powers. But just as the universe must be ruled by God, so must the many-sided soul of man be ruled by its God, the spirit of man. The higher self must dominate its universe, or there will be unbalanced force. Each factor will rule its own aspect, and they will war among themselves. Then do we have the rule of the kings of Edom, whose kingdoms are unbalanced force. Thus do we see in the tree a glyph of the soul of man and the universe, and in the legends associated with it, the history of the evolution of the soul and the way of initiation. The point of view from which I approach the Holy Kabbalah in these pages differs, so far as I know, from that of all other writers on the subject. For to me it is a living system of spiritual development, not a historical curiosity. Few people, even among those interested in occultism, realize that there is an active esoteric tradition in our midst, handed down in private manuscripts and by mouth to ear. Still fewer know that it is the Holy Kabbalah, the mystic system of Israel, which forms its basis. But where may we look more aptly for our occult inspiration than to the tradition which gave us the Christ? The interpretation of the Kabbalah is not to be found, however, among the rabbis of the outer Israel, who are Hebrews after the flesh, but among those who are the chosen people after the Spirit, in other words, the initiates. Neither is the Kabbalah, as I have learnt it, a purely Hebraic system, for it has been supplemented during medieval times by much alchemical lore and by the intimate association with it of that most marvelous system of symbolism, the tarot. In my presentation of the subject, therefore, I do not appeal so much to tradition in support of my views as to modern practice among those who make use of the Kabbalah as their method of occult technique. It may be alleged against me that the ancient rabbis knew nothing of some of the concepts here set forth. To this, I reply that it is hardly to be expected that they should, as these things were not known in their day, but are the work of their successors of the spiritual Israel. For my part, although I would not willingly mislead anyone concerning the teachings of those of ancient days, and upon matters of historical accuracy stand subject to correction from any who are better informed than I am in these matters, and their name is legion. I care not one jot for the authority of tradition if it hampers the free development of a system of such practical value as the Holy Kabbalah. And I use the work of my predecessors as a quarry whence I fetch the stone to build my city. Neither am I limited to this quarry by any ordinance that I know of, but fetch also cedar from Lebanon and gold from Ophir if it suits my purpose. Let it be clearly understood, therefore, that I do not say, this is the teaching of the ancient rabbis. Rather do I say, this is the practice of the modern Kabbalists, and for us a much more vital matter. For it is a practical system of spiritual unfoldment. It is the yoga of the West. Having thus guarded myself as far as possible against blame for not having done what I never undertook to do, let me now define my own position in the matter of scholarship and general qualifications for the task in hand. So far as actual scholarship goes, I am in the same class as William Shakespeare, having little Latin and less Greek, and of Hebrew only that peculiar portion which is cultivated by occultists. the ability to transliterate unpointed Hebrew script for the purposes of geometric calculation. Of any knowledge of Hebrew as a language, I am guiltless. Whether such frank acknowledgement of my deficiencies will serve to disarm criticism, I do not know. No doubt it will be alleged against me, and not without justification, that one so ill-equipped should not have undertaken the task at all. To this I replied that if one saw a man dying injured, should the admitted absence of a medical qualification debar one from going to his assistance and giving him what help one could, pending the arrival of qualified attention. My work upon the Kabbalah is of the nature of first aid. I find an invaluable system lying neglected and ill-qualified for the task as I may be. I am striving to draw attention to its possibilities and restore it to its proper place as the key to Western occultism, and it is my chief hope in so doing that it may attract the attention of scholars, and that they will continue the task of translation and investigation of the Kabbalistic manuscripts, which are as yet a vein of which only the outcroppings have been worked. One qualification for my task I complete in justification, however. For the last 10 years I have lived and moved and had my being in the practical Kabbalah. I have used its methods both subjectively and objectively till they have become a part of myself, and I know from experience what they yield in psychic and spiritual results, and their incalculable value as a method of using the mind. It is not required of those who would use the Kabbalah as their yoga that they should acquire any extensive knowledge of the Hebrew language. All they need is to be able to read and write the Hebrew characters. The modern Kabbalah has been pretty thoroughly naturalized in the English language, but it retains, and must ever retain, all its words of power in Hebrew, which is the sacred language of the West, just as Sanskrit is the sacred language of the East. There are those who have objected to the free employment of Sanskrit terms in occult literature, and no doubt they will object even more strongly to the employment of Hebrew characters. But their use is unavoidable, for every letter in Hebrew is also a number, and the numbers to which words add up are not only an important clue to their significance, but can also be used to express the relationships existing between different ideas and potencies. According to MacGregor Mathers, in the admirable essay which forms the introduction to his book, the Kabbalah is usually classed under 4 heads. The practical Kabbalah, which deals with talismanic and ceremonial magic. The dogmatic Kabbalah, which consists of the Kabbalistic literature. The literal Kabbalah, which deals with the use of letters and number. The unwritten Kabbalah, which consists of a correct knowledge of the manner in which the symbol systems are arranged on the tree of life, and concerning which MacGregor Mathers said, "I may say no more on this point, not even whether I myself have or have not received it. But as this portentous hint is elaborated by the late Mrs. MacGregor Mathers in her introduction to the new edition of his book in the following plain-spoken words. Simultaneously with the publication of the Kabbalah in 1887, he received instructions from his occult teachers to prepare what was eventually to become his esoteric school. It may be justifiable to say that if he did receive the unwritten Kabbalah, it has for some years ceased to be unwritten, for after a quarrel with MacGregor Mathers, Aleister Crowley, the well-known author and scholar, published the lot. His books are now rare and hard to come by, and being much valued by the more scholarly of esotericists, their price has gone up out of sight, and they seldom come into the second-hand book market. The breaking of an initiation oath is a serious matter, and a thing that I, for my part, do not care to do. But I admit of no authority that debars me from collecting and collating all available material that has been published upon any subject, and interpreting it according to the best of my understanding. In these pages, it is the system given by Crowley of which I shall avail myself to supplement the points upon which MacGregor Mathers, Wynne Westcott, and I.E. Waite, the principal modern authorities upon the Kabbalah, are silent. As to whether I myself have received any knowledge of the unwritten Kabbalah, it would as ill beseem me as MacGregor Mathers to be explicit upon this point. And having followed his classic example of burying my head in the sand and waving my tail, I will return to the consideration of the matter in hand. The essence of the unwritten Kabbalah lies in the knowledge of the order in which certain sets of symbols are arranged upon the tree of life. This tree, Otshin, consists of the 10 holy Sephiroth, arranged in a particular pattern and connected by lines which are called the 32 paths of the Sefer Yetzirah, or divine emanations. Here there exists one of the blinds, or traps for the uninitiated, in which the ancient rabbis delighted. We find, if we count them, that there are 22, not 32 paths upon the tree, but for their purposes, the rabbis treated the 10 Sephiroth themselves as paths, thus misleading the uninitiated. Thus, the first 10 paths of the Sefer Yetzirah are assigned to the 10 Sephiroth, and the following 22 to the actual paths themselves. It will then be seen how the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet can be associated with the paths without discrepancy or overlapping. With them also are associated the 22 tarot trumps, the Etu, or abodes of Thoth. Concerning the tarot cards, there are 3 modern authorities of note: Dr. Encuse, or Pape, the French writer, Mr. A.E. Waite, and the MSS of MacGregor Mather's Order of the Golden Dawn, which Crowley published upon his own authority. All 3 are different. Concerning the system Mr. Waite gives, he himself says, there is another method known to initiates. There is reason to suppose that this is the method used by Mathers. Pappas disagrees with both these writers and his method, but as his system does violence to many of the correspondences when placed upon the tree, the final test of all systems, and as the Mathers-Crowley system fits admirably, I think we may justly conclude that the latter is the correct traditional order, and I propose to adhere to it in these pages. The Kabbalists further placed upon the paths of the tree the signs of the zodiac, the planets, and the elements. Now there are 12 signs, 7 planets, and 4 elements, making 23 symbols in all. How are these to be fitted on to the 22 paths? Herein is another blind, but the solution is simple. Upon the physical plane, we are ourselves in the element of earth. Therefore, that symbol does not appear upon the paths which lead into the unseen. Remove this, and we are left with 22 symbols, which fit accurately and correctly placed are found to correspond perfectly with the tarot trumps, each elucidating the other in the most remarkable fashion, and giving the keys to esoteric astrology and tarot divination. The essence of each path is to be found in the fact that it connects 2 of the Sephiroth, and we can only understand its significance by taking into account the nature of the linked spheres upon the tree. But a Sephirah cannot be understood upon a single plane. It has a 4-fold nature. The Kabbalists express this by saying that there are 4 worlds: Atziluth, the archetypal world, or world of emanations, the divine world; Raya, the world of creation, also called Korsa, the world of thrones; Yetzirah, the world of formation and of angels; Aseh, the world of action, the world of matter. The 10 holy Sephiroth are held to have each its own point of contact with each of the 4 worlds of the Kabbalists. In the Atziluthic world, they manifest through the 10 holy names of God. In other words, the great unmanifest, shadowed forth through the 3 negative veils of existence which hang behind the crown, declares itself in manifestation as 10 different aspects which are represented by the different names used to denote deity in the Hebrew scriptures. These are variously rendered in the authorized version, and a knowledge of their true significance and the spheres to which they belong enables us to read many of the riddles of the Old Testament. In the Briatic world, the divine emanations are held to manifest through the 10 mighty archangels, whose names play such an important part in ceremonial magic. It is the worn and effaced remnants of these words of power that are the barbarous names of avocation of medieval magic, not one letter of which may be changed. Why this is so may readily be seen when we remember that in Hebrew a letter is also a number, and the numbers of a name have an important significance. In the Yetziratic world, the divine emanations manifest, not through a single being, but through different types of beings, which are called the angelic hosts or choirs. The Asiatic world is not, strictly speaking, the world of matter when viewed from the Sephirotic standpoint, but rather the lower astral and etheric planes which together form the background of matter. Upon the physical plane, the divine emanations manifest through what may not inaptly be called the 10 mundane chakras, likening these centers of manifestation to the centers that exist in the human body. An exact analogy. These chakras are the prima mobile or first swirlings, the sphere of the zodiac, the 7 planets, and the elements taken together 10 in all. It will be seen from the foregoing that each sphere will therefore consist, firstly, of its mundane chakra, secondly, of an angelic host of beings, devas or archon, principalities or powers, according to the terminology used, thirdly, an archangelic consciousness or throne, and fourthly, a special aspect of the deity, God as he is, in his entirety, being hidden behind the negative veils of existence, incomprehensible to unenlightened human consciousness. The Sephiroth may justly be considered macrocosmic, and the paths microcosmic, for the Sephiroth, connected as they sometimes are in old diagrams by a flash of lightning, which is often depicted as hilted like a fiery sword, represent the successive divine emanations which constitute creative evolution, whereas the paths represent the successive stages of the unfolding of cosmic realization in human consciousness. In old pictures, a serpent is often depicted as twined about the boughs of the tree. This is the serpent Nekushtan who holdeth his tail in his mouth, the symbol of wisdom and initiation. The coils of this serpent, when correctly arranged upon the tree, cross each of the paths in succession and see to indicate the order in which they should be numbered. With the help of this glyph, then, it is a simple matter to arrange all the tables of symbols in their correct positions upon the tree, granted that the symbols are given in their correct order in the tables. In certain modern books which rank as authorities upon the subject, the correct order is not given, the writers apparently holding that this should not be revealed to the uninitiated. But as this order is given correctly in certain older books, and for the matter of that, in the Bible itself and the Kabbalistic literature, there seems to me no point in deliberately misleading students with spurious information. To refuse to divulge anything may be justifiable, but how is it possible to justify the handing on of misleading statement? No one is going to be persecuted nowadays for their studies in unorthodox sciences, so there can be but one purpose in withholding teaching that relates solely to the theory of the universe and the philosophy arising therefrom, and in no way to the methods of practical magic. And that purpose is to retain a monopoly of the knowledge which confers prestige, if not power. For my part, I believe that this selfishness and exclusiveness is the bane of the occult movement, rather than its safeguard. It is the old sin of retaining the knowledge of God in the hands of a priesthood and denying it to all outside the sacred clan, justifiable enough when the people were savages, but unjustifiable in the case of the modern student. For when all is said and done, the desired information can be worked out from existing literature by those who care to take the trouble, or purchased plainly set forth by those who can afford high prices for books now rare. Surely the possession of ample time and ample cash should not be the test of the fitness to obtain the sacred wisdom. No doubt I shall expose myself to a shower of abuse from the self-constituted guardians of this knowledge, who may hold that their precious secrets have been betrayed. To this I reply that I am not betraying anything that is secret, but collecting that which has already been given to the world and is of a simple and well-known nature. When I first had access to certain manuscripts, I believed them to be secret and unknown to the world at large. But a wider acquaintance with occult literature has revealed to me that the information is to be found scattered broadcast through it. Much, in fact, to which the initiated sworn to secrecy has been published by Mathers and Wynne Westcott themselves, and as recently as 1926, a new edition of Mathers' work on the Kabbalah was brought out under the editorship of his widow, who may be assumed to have known his wishes. And in that work will be found most of the tables that I give in these pages. As these catalogs of beings were originally given to the world by Isaiah, Ezekiel, and various medieval rabbis, it may justly be held that the copyright in them has lapsed owing to the passage of time. In any case, such ownership as there may be in these ideas is vested in the original author and not in any subsequent commentator, and that author, according to the Kabbalah itself, is the Archangel Metatron, Much that was once common knowledge has been gathered up and confined under the initiate's oath of secrecy. It is Crowley's jibe at his teachers that they bound him to secrecy with terrible oaths, and then confided the Hebrew alphabet to his safekeeping. The philosophy of the Kabbalah is the esotericism of the West. In it we find such a cosmogony, as he is found in the stanzas of Dion, which were the basis of Mimi Blavatsky's work. Herein she found the framework of traditional doctrine which she expounded in her great book, The Secret Doctrine. This Kabbalistic cosmogony is the Christian gnosis. Without it, we have an incomplete system in our religion, and it is this incomplete system which has been the weakness of Christianity. The early fathers, in the homely metaphor, threw away the baby with the bathwater. A very cursory acquaintance with the Kabbalah serves to show that here we have the essential keys to the riddles of Scripture in general, and the prophetic books in particular. Is there any good reason why initiates of the present day should put all this knowledge into a secret box and sit upon the lid? If they consider that I am wrong to give accurate information upon matters which they consider their private preserve, I reply that this is a free country, and they are entitled to their opinion. The esotericist, when endeavoring to formulate his philosophy for communication to others, is confronted by the fact that his knowledge of the higher forms of existence is obtained by a process other than thought, and this process only commences when thought is left behind. Consequently, it is only in that region of consciousness which transcends thought that the highest form of transcendental ideas is known and understood, and it is only to those who are able to use this aspect of consciousness that he can communicate his ideas in their original form. When he wants to communicate these ideas to those who have had no experience of this mode of consciousness, he must either crystallize them into form or fail to convey any adequate impression. Mystics have used every imaginable simile in the endeavor to convey their impressions. Philosophers have lost themselves in a maze of words, and all to no purpose so far as the unilluminated soul is concerned. The Kabbalists, however, use another method. They do not try to explain to the mind that which the mind is not equipped to deal with. They give it a series of symbols to meditate upon, and these enable it to build the stairway of realization step by step and to climb where it cannot fly. The mind can no more grasp transcendent philosophy than the eye can see music. The tree of life, as cannot be too often emphasized, is not so much a system as a method. Those who formulated it realized the important truth that in order to obtain clarity of vision, one must circumscribe the field of vision. Most philosophers founded their systems upon the absolute, but this is a shifting foundation, for the human mind can neither define nor grasp the absolute. Some others try to use negation for their foundation, declaring that the absolute is and must ever be unknowable. The Kabbalists do neither of these things. They content themselves with saying that the absolute is unknown to the state of consciousness which is normal to human beings. For the purposes of their system, therefore, they draw a veil at a certain point in manifestation, not because there is nothing there, but because the mind, as such, must stop there. When the human mind has been brought to its highest stage of development, and consciousness can detach itself and, as it were, stand upon its own shoulders, we may be able to penetrate the veils of negative existence, as they are called. But for all practical purposes, we can understand the nature of the cosmos if we are content to accept the veils as philosophical conventions and realize that they correspond to human limitations, not to cosmic conditions. The origin of things is inexplicable in terms of our philosophy. However far we push our inquiries back into origins in the world of manifestation, we find a preceding existence. It is only when we are content to draw the veil of negative existence across the path, which leads back to beginnings, that we get a background against which a first cause becomes visible. And this first cause is not a rootless origin, but a first appearance on the plane of manifestation. Thus far and no farther can the mind go back. But we must always remember that different minds go back different distances, and that for some the veil is drawn in one place and for others in another. The ignorant man goes no further than the concept of God as an old man with a long white beard who sat on a golden throne and gave orders for creation. The scientist will go back a little further before he is compelled to draw a veil called the ether, and the philosopher will go back yet further before he draws a veil called the absolute. But the initiate will go back furthest of all because he has learned to do his thinking in symbols, and symbols are to the mind what tools are to the hand an extended application of its power. The Kabbalist takes for his starting point Kether, the crown, the first sephira, which he symbolizes by the figure 1, unit, and by the point within the circle. From this, he traces backward the 3 veils of negative existence. This is quite a different matter from starting at the absolute and trying to work forwards into evolution. It may not yield immediately accurate and complete knowledge of the origin of all things, but it enables the mind to make a start. And unless we can make a start, we have no hope of a finish. The Kabbalist, then, starts where he can at the first point that is within the reach of finite consciousness. Kether is equated with the most transcendent form of God that we can conceive, whose name is Ehi, translated in the authorized version of the Bible as I am, or, more explicitly, the self-existing one, pure being. But these words are words and nothing more unless they convey an impression to the mind, and in themselves, they cannot do that. They must be related to other ideas before they have any significance. We only begin to understand Kether when we study Chokmah, the second Sephirah, its emanation. It is only when we see the full unfoldment of the 10 Sephiroth that we are ready to approach Kether. And then we approach it with the data that gives us the key to its nature. In working with the tree, it is wisest to keep on going over it, rather than to concentrate upon a single point until it is mastered, for one thing explains another. And it is out of the perception of the relationships between the different symbols that enlightenment arises. Again, we say, the tree is a method of using the mind, not a system of knowledge. But at the moment, we are not engaged in the study of the emanations, but of origins, so far as the human mind may hope to penetrate them, and paradoxical as it may appear. We shall penetrate further when we draw the veils across them than when we try to pierce the darkness. We will, then, sum up the position of Kether in one sentence, a sentence that can have but little significance for the student approaching the subject for the first time, but which must be borne in mind, for its significance will begin to dawn presently. In so doing, we are adhering to the ancient esoteric tradition of giving the student a symbol to incubate till it hatches in his mind, rather than explicit instruction which would convey nothing to him. The seed sentence, then, which we cast into the subconscious mind of the reader, is this: Kether is the Malkuth of the unmanifest. Mathers says, the limitless ocean of negative light does not proceed from a center, for it is centerless, but it concentrates a center, which is the number 1 of the manifested Sephiroth, Kether, the crown, the first Sephirah. These words in themselves contain contradictions and unthinkable. Negative light is simply a way of saying that the thing described, though having certain qualities in common with light, is nevertheless not light as we know it. This tells us very little about that which it is intended to describe. We are told not to make the mistake of thinking of it as light, but we are not told how to think of it as it really is. And for the very good reason that the mind is not equipped with any images under which to represent it, and must therefore let it alone till growth takes place. Nevertheless, although these words do not tell us all that we would like to know, they convey certain images to the imagination. These sink into the subconscious mind which are related to them. Thus, knowledge grows from more to more when the Kabbalistic method is given its practical application as the yoga of the West. The Kabbalists recognize 4 planes of manifestation and 3 planes of unmanifestation, or negative existence. The first of these is called A, negativity. The second, Ein Sof, the limitless. The third, Ein Sof, or the limitless light. It is out of this last that Kether is concentrated. These 3 terms are called the 3 veils of negative existence. Depending back from Kether, in other words, they are the algebraic symbols that enable us to think of that which transcends thought, and which at the same time hide that which they represent. They are the masks of transcendent realities. If we think of the states of negative existence in terms of anything that we know, we shall err, for whatever else they may be, they cannot be that, being unmanifest. The expression veil, therefore, teaches us to use these ideas as counters, of no value in themselves, but useful to us in our calculations. This is the true use of all symbols. They veil that which they represent until we can reduce them to terms we can comprehend. Nevertheless, they enable us to use in our calculations ideas which would otherwise be unthinkable. And as the essence of the tree lies in the fact that it causes its symbols to elucidate one another by means of their relative positions, these veils serve as the scaffolding of thought, enabling us to take our bearings in regions as yet uncharted. Such veils, or non-concrete symbols, are, however, of no value to us unless one side of the veil abuts upon known country. The veils, in fact, while they conceal that which they represent, enable us to see clearly that to which they form a background. This is their function, and the only reason they are referred to. It is only by reason of our infirmities that we need to have these unresolvable symbols presented to us. And the mind disciplined in esoteric philosophy soon learns to work within these limitations and accept as a painted veil the symbol of that which lies beyond its ken. This way lies the unfoldment of wisdom, for the mind grows with what it feeds upon, and one of these days, when we have climbed together, we may hope to stretch out our hands and rend the veil and look through into the limitless light. The esotericist does not limit himself by declaring the unknown to be the unknowable, for he is above all things an evolutionist, and knows that that which we cannot compass today we may achieve tomorrow of cosmic time. He knows, too, that evolutionary time is an individual matter upon the inner planes, and is measured, not regulated, by the revolution of the earth upon its axis. These three veils, Ein, negativity, Ein Sof, the limitless, and Ein Sof Or, the limitless light, though we cannot hope to understand them, nevertheless suggest to our minds certain ideas. Negativity implies being or existence of a nature which we cannot comprehend. We cannot conceive of a thing which is, and yet is not. Therefore, we must conceive of a form of being of which we have never had any conscious experience, a form of being which, according to our concepts of existence, does not exist, and yet, if one may express it so, exists according to its own idea of existence. In the words of a very wise man, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy. But although we say that negative existence is outside the range of our realization, it does not mean that we are outside the range of its influence. If this were so, we could dismiss it as non-existent so far as we are concerned, and our interest in it would be at an end. On the contrary, although we have no direct access to its being, all that we know as existing has its roots in this negative existence, so that, although we cannot know it directly, we have experience of it at one remove. That is to say, although we cannot know its nature, we know its effects, in the same way as we are ignorant of the nature of electricity yet are able to turn it to good account in our lives. And from our experience of its effects, we are able to come to certain conclusions concerning some at least of the qualities it must possess. Those who have penetrated furthest into the unseen have given us symbolic descriptions by means of which we may turn our minds in the direction of the absolute, even if we cannot reach it. They have spoken of negative existence as light, and Sof Or, the limitless light. They have spoken of the first manifest as sound. In the beginning was the Word. I remember once hearing a man, who was an adept if ever there was one, say, "If you want to know what God is, I can tell you in one word, God is pressure." And immediately an image leapt to my mind, and a realization followed. I could conceive the outflowing of life through every channel of existence. I felt that a genuine realization of the nature of God had been conveyed to me. And yet, if one came to analyze the words, there was nothing in them. Nevertheless, they had the power to convey an image, a symbol, to the mind, and the mind, working upon it in the realm of intuition beyond the sphere of reason, achieved a realization, even if that realization could only be reduced to the sphere of concrete thought as an image. We must clearly realize that in these highly abstract regions, the mind can use nothing but symbols, but these symbols have the power to convey realizations to minds that know how to use them. these symbols are. The seeds of thought whence understanding arises, even if we are not able to expand the symbol itself into a concrete realization. Little by little, like a rising tide, realization is concreting the abstract, assimilating and expressing in terms of its own nature things which belong to another sphere. And we shall make a great mistake if we try to prove with Herbert Spencer that because a thing is unknown by any capacity of the mind we at present possess, that it must forever be unknowable. Time is not only increasing our knowledge, but evolution is increasing our capacity and initiation, which is the forcing house of evolution, bringing faculties to birth out of due season, brings the consciousness of the adept within reach of vast apprehensions which are as yet below the horizon of the human mind. These ideas, though clearly apprehended by himself after another mode of consciousness, cannot be conveyed by him to anyone who does not share this mode of consciousness. He can only put them forth in symbolic form, but any mind that has in any way had experience of this wider mode of functioning will be able to lay hold on these ideas on their own plane, although it may be unable to translate them into the sphere of conscious thought. In this way, therefore, in the literature of esoteric science, there are scattered seed ideas, such as God is pressure, and Kether is the Malkuth of negative existence. These images, whose content does not belong to our sphere at all, are as the male germs of thought which fecundate the ova of concrete realization. In themselves, they are incapable of maintaining more than the fugitive existence in consciousness as a flash of realization, but without them, the ova of philosophical thought will be infertile. Impregnated by them, however, though their substance is absorbed and lost in the very act of impregnation, growth takes place within the formless germ of thought, and ultimately, after due gestation beyond the threshold of consciousness, the mind gives birth to an idea.
If we want to get the best out of our minds, we must learn to allow for this period of latency, this impregnation of our minds by something outside our plane of existence, and its gestation beyond the threshold of consciousness. The invocations of an initiation ceremony are designed to call down this impregnating influence upon the consciousness of the candidate. Hence it is that the paths of the tree, which are the stages of illumination of the soul, are intimately associated with the symbolism of initiation ceremonies. Before we can understand the significance of any individual sephira, we must grasp the broad outlines of the Otzchim, the tree of life, as a whole. It is a glyph, a composite symbol intended to represent the cosmos in its entirety, and the soul of man is related thereto. The more we study it, the more we see that it is an amazingly adequate representation. We use it as the engineer or the mathematician uses his sliding rule to scan and calculate the intricacies of existence, visible and invisible, in external nature or the hidden depth of the soul. It is represented as a set of 10 circles, arranged in a certain pattern, connected among themselves by lines. The circles are the 10 holy sephiroth, and the connecting lines are the paths, 22 in number. Each sephirah is a phase of evolution called the 10 holy emanations. The paths between them are phases of subjective consciousness, the paths or grades by which the soul unfolds its realization of the cosmos. The sephiroth are objective, the paths are subjective. Let it be recalled again that I am not expounding the traditional Kabbalah of the rabbis as a historical curio, but the structure that has been raised upon it by generations of students initiates all of them, adepts some of them, who have made the Tree of Life their instrument of spiritual development and magical work. This is the modern Kabbalah, the alchemical Kabbalah as it has sometimes been called, and it contains all manner of things beside traditional rabbinical lore, as will be seen in due course. Let us now consider the general layout and significance of the tree. It will be seen that the circles which represent the Sephiroth are arranged in 3 vertical columns, and that at the head of the center, higher than any other, forming the apex of the topmost triangle of Sephiroth, is the Sephirah Kether, to which we referred in the previous chapter. Madame Blavatsky draws from Eastern sources the term, the point within the circle. to express the first becoming of manifestation, and the idea is contained in the rabbinical term, Nekudah Rashunab, the primal point, a name applied to Kether. But Kether does not represent a position in space. The Ein Sof Aur has been called a circle whose center is everywhere, and whose circumference is nowhere, a statement which, like so many in occultism, is inconceivable, yet nevertheless presents an image to the mind and therefore serves its purpose. Kether, then, and for the matter of that, all the other Sephiroth, is a state or condition of existence. We must always bear in mind that the planes do not tower up one above another into the empyrean like the stories of a building, but are conditions of being, states of existence of different types, and though they developed successively in time, they occur simultaneously in space, existence of all types being present in a single being. As we realize when we remember that the being of man is made up of a physical body, emotions, mind, and spirit, all occupying the same space at the same time. If anyone has ever watched a heated liquid at saturation point crystallize out as it cools, they will have a useful symbol of Kether. Fill a tumbler with boiling water and dissolve in it as much sugar as it will take up. And then, as the mixture cools, watch the sugar crystals appearing. When you have done this in actuality, and not merely read about it, you will have a concept under which you can think of the first manifest coming into existence out of the primordial unmanifest. The liquid is transparent and formless, but a change occurs within it, and crystals, solid, visible, and of a definite form, begin to appear. Equally may we conceive that a change occurs within the limitless light, and Kether crystallizes out. I do not propose at the present moment to go deeply into the nature of any of the Sephiroth, but merely to indicate the general scheme of the tree. We shall go over the ground again and again in the course of these pages, until a comprehensive concept is built up. This can only be done gradually, and if we spend a great deal of time upon an individual point before the student has a general concept, much of that time will be wasted because the bearing of that concept on the scheme as a whole will not be understood. The rabbis themselves applied to Kether the titles, concealed of the concealed and the inscrutable height, hinting that there is not a great deal that the human mind can hope to know about Kether. It is worthy of note that Esoteric Judaism, to whose liabilities Christianity is the not altogether fortunate heir, does not contain any concept of the emanations or overflowing of the Sephiroth one from another. It declares that God made the sea and the hills and the beasts of the field, and we visualize this process, if we visualize it at all, as the work of a celestial craftsman fashioning each new phase of manifestation and putting the finished product in its place in the world. This concept kept science back for hundreds of years in Western Europe, and in the end, men of science had to break with religion and endure persecution as heretics in order to arrive at that conception of evolution, which was explicitly taught in the mystic tradition of Israel, a tradition with which the writers of the Old Testament were unquestionably familiar, for their works are full of Kabbalistic references and implications. The Kabbalah does not conceive of God as fabricating creation stage by stage, but thinks of the different phases of manifestation as evolving one from another, as if each sephira were a pool which, being filled, overflowed into a lower pool. To borrow again from MacGregor Mathers, hidden mown acorn is an oak with its acorns, and hidden in each of these is an oak with its acorns. So each sephira contains the potentiality of all that come after it in the scale of overflowing manifestation. Kether contains the rest of the Sephiroth, 9 in number, and Chokmah, the second, contains the potentialities of all its successors, 8 in number. But in each sephira, only one aspect of manifestation is unfolded. The subsequent ones remain latent, and the preceding ones are received by reflection. Each sephira, then, is a pure form of existence in its essence. The influence of preceding phases of evolution is external to it, being reflected. These aspects, as it were, having been crystallized out in the previous stages, are no longer in solution in the outflowing stream of manifestation which ever proceedeth from the unmanifest through the channel of Kether. When therefore we want to find the essential nature, the basis of manifestation of a particular type of existence, we get it in the Sephirah, to which it corresponds when we meditate upon that Sephirah in its primal form. For there are 4 forms, or worlds, under which the Kabbalists conceive of the tree, and these we will consider in due course. They are only referred to now in order that the student may have enough background to see his picture in perspective. The student will find it very helpful to refer to the chapters in the Ancient Wisdom by Annie Besant, which deal with the phases of evolution. These throw much light upon the subject with which we are dealing, though the system of classification is not the same. Let us conceive of Kether, then, as a fountain which fills its basin, and the overflow therefrom feeds another fountain, which in its turn fills its basin and overflows. The unmanifest forever flows under pressure into Kether, and there comes a time when evolution has gone as far as it can in the extreme simplicity of the form of existence of the first manifest. All possible combinations have been formed, and they have undergone all possible permutations. Action and reaction are stereotyped. There can be no new development save the combining of the combinations among themselves. When this occurs, a new and more highly organized phase of existence begins. All that has already been evolved remains, but that which evolves now is more than the sum of the previously existing parts, for new capacities come into being. This new phase represents a change of mode of existence. Just as Kether crystallized out of the limitless light, so the second Sephirah, Chokmah, crystallizes out of Kether in this new mode of being, this new system of actions and reactions which have ceased to be simple and direct and become complex and tangential. We now have 2 modes of existence, the simplicity of Kether and the relative complexity of Chokmah. Both these are so simple that no kind of life known to us could he maintained in them. Nevertheless, they are the forerunners of organic life. We might say that Kether is the first activity of manifestation, movement. It is a condition of pure becoming. Rashith ha-Gilgalim, the first swirlings, the commencement of whirling motions, as it is called by the Kabbalists. Primum mobile, as it is called by the alchemists. Chokmah, the second Sephirah, is called by the rabbis Mazloth, the sphere of the zodiac. Here we have introduced the concept of the circle with its segments. Creation has moved onwards. Out of the primordial egg has developed the serpent that holdeth his tail in his mouth, as Madame Blavatsky chronicles in her invaluable storehouses of archaic symbolism, the secret doctrine and Isis unveiled. In a similar manner to that in which Kether overflowed into Chokmah, does Chokmah overflow into Bina, the third Sephirah. The paths pursued by the emanations in these successive overflows are represented upon the tree of life by a lightning flash, or in some diagrams by a flaming sword. It will be observed, by reference to diagram I, that the lightning flash must proceed from Kether outwards and downwards to the right to reach Chokmah, and then turns on a level course to the left and proceeds an equal distance beyond Kether upon that side, and there establishes Bina. The result is a triangular figure upon the glyph, and it is called the triangle of the 3 supernals, or the first trinity, and is separated from the rest of the Sephiroth by the abyss, which normal human consciousness cannot cross. Here are the roots of existence, hidden from our eyes.
Having considered and outlined the development of the 3 first divine emanations, we are now in a position to obtain a deeper insight into their nature and significance. We can study them in relation to each other. This is the only way to study the Sephiroth, for a single Sephirah, taken by itself, is barren of significance. The tree of life is essentially a scheme of relationships, stresses, and reflections. The rabbinical books apply many curious appellations to the Sephiroth, and we learn much from considering these. For every word in these books has a weighty significance. None are used lightly or for the sake of idle poetic imagery. All are as precise as scientific terms, which in fact is what they are. The meaning of the word kether, we have already noted, is crown. Chokmah means wisdom, and Bina means understanding. But pendant to these two latter Sephiroth is a curious and mysterious third. This is the invisible Sephira, Dath, knowledge. It is said to be formed out of the conjunction of Chokmah and Bina, and is situated astride the abyss. Crowley tells us that Dath is in another dimension to the other Sephiroth, and forms the apex of a pyramid, of which Kether, Chokmah, and Bina form the three basal angles. To me, Dath presents the idea of realization and consciousness. Let us now proceed to elucidate the three supernals according to the method of the Mystical Kabalah. This method consists in filling the mind with all the correspondences and symbols assigned thereto, and letting contemplation work among them. It will be observed that these three and their mysterious fourth all contain symbolism relating to the head, which in the archetypal man represents the highest level of consciousness. When we seek in the rabbinical literature to see what further names may have been applied to them, we find yet more head symbolism applied to Kether. This, although not specifically referred to them, may be taken to embrace the other two supernals also, for they are aspects of Kether on a lower plane. The rabbis called Kether, among other titles, which we need not consider now, Eric Ampin, the vast countenance, the white head, the head which is not. The magical symbol of Kether, according to Crowley, is an ancient bearded king seen in profile. MacGregor Mather says, the symbolism of the vast countenance is that of a profile in which one side only of the countenance is seen, or as it is said in the Kabbalah. In him is all right side. The left side, being turned towards the unmanifest, is for us like the dark side of the moon. But Kether is primarily the crown. Now the crown is not the head, but rests upon it and above it. Therefore, Kether cannot be consciousness, but the raw material of consciousness when considered microcosmically, and the raw material of existence when considered macrocosmically. For there is this twofold way of considering the tree, as we have already noted. It can be regarded as the universe and as the soul of man, and these two aspects throw light upon each other. In the words of the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, as above, so below. Kether differentiates into Chokmah and Bina before it achieves phenomenal existence, and these two are called by the Kabbalists Abba, the supernal father, and Amma, the supernal mother. Bina is also called the Great Sea, and Shahatai, the sphere of Saturn. As we continue, we shall find that the Sephiroth are called successively the spheres of the planets, but Bina is the first of the emanations to be so assigned. Kether is called the first whirlings, and Chokmah the sphere of the zodiac. Now Saturn is the father of the gods. He is the greatest of the old gods that were the predecessors of the Olympians over which Jupiter rules. In the secret titles attributed to the tarot trumps, the path of Saturn is called, according to Crowley, the Great One of the Night of Time. We have then Kether differentiating into an active male potency, Chokmah, and a passive female potency, Bina. And these are placed at the head of the two side columns formed by the vertical alignment of the Sephiroth in their spacing on the Tree of Life. Of these two columns, the left-hand one under Bina is called Severity, the right-hand one under Chokmah is called Mercy, the middle one under Kether is called Mildness, and it is said to be the column of equilibrium. These two side columns are the two pillars that stand at the entrance to King Solomon's temple, and are represented in all lodges of the mysteries. The candidate himself, when he stands between them, is the middle pillar of equilibrium. Here we meet with the idea put forth by Blavatsky, that there can be no manifestation without differentiation into the pairs of opposites. Kether differentiates its two aspects as Chokmah and Bina, and manifestation is in being. Now, in this supernal triangle, the head which is not, the father and the mother, we have the root concept of our cosmogony, and we shall return to it again and again under innumerable aspects. And each time that we return to it, we shall receive illumination These earlier chapters do not attempt to deal with any of the points exhaustively for reasons already noted. For the student unfamiliar with the subject, and there are very few students who are familiar with it, has not yet got the necessary mental furniture of facts to enable him to appreciate the significance of a more detailed study. We are at the present moment engaged in assembling this furniture. In due course, we shall begin to arrange it into a house of life and study it in detail. Bina, the superior mother, as distinguished from Malkuth, the inferior mother, the bride of microprosopos, the Isis of nature, the 10th Sephira, is two-aspected, and these aspects are distinguished as Amma, the dark, sterile mother, and Ima, the bright, fertile mother. We have already noted that she is called the Great Sea Mara, which not only means bitter, but also is the root of Mary. And here we meet again the idea of the mother, at first virgin, and then with child by the Holy Spirit. By the association of Bina with the sea, we are reminded that life had its primordial beginnings in the waters. From the sea arose Venus, the archetypal woman. The association of Saturn suggests the idea of primordial age. Before the gods that made the gods had drunk at eve their fill, it suggests the most ancient rocks. Within the shady stillness of the veil sat gray-haired Saturn, quiet as a stone. Max Heindel speaks of the Lords of Form as among the earliest phases of evolution, and an inspirational work in my possession, The Cosmic Doctrine, speaks of the Lords of Form as the laws of geology. Considering again the symbolism of the two lateral columns of the tree, we see Chokma and Bina as force and form, the two units of manifestation. It would not profit us to go more deeply into the endless ramifications of this symbolism at the present moment, for it is carrying us beyond the three Sephiroth we have already studied. Let us proceed to a further consideration of the mysterious Dath, which never appears on the tree, and to which no deity name or angelic host is assigned, and which has no mundane symbol in planet or element, as have all the other stations on the tree. Dath is produced by the conjunction of Chokma and Bina, as has been already noted. The supernal father, Abba, marries the supernal mother, Amma, and Diath is the issue. Now, Dath is called some curious things by the Kabbalists. We will note two of them. In verse 38 of the Book of Concealed Mystery, Mather's English translation from the Latin translation of Noor von Rosenroth, it says, "For father and mother are perpetually conjoined in Yesod, the foundation, the 9th Sephira, but concealed under the mystery of Dath or knowledge." And in verse 40 we read concerning Dath, "The man that shall say, I am the Lord's, he descendeth." Yod, the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, is the foundation of knowledge of the Father, but all things are called Biodo, that is, all things are applied to Yod concerning which this discourse is. All things cohere in the tongue which is concealed in the mother, that is, through Dath or knowledge, whereby wisdom is combined with understanding, and the beautiful path, Tifereth, the 6th Sephira, with his bride the queen, Malkuth, the 10th Sephira, and this is the concealed idea, or soul, pervading the whole emanation, since it is open for that which proceedeth from itself, that is, Dath is itself the beautiful path, but also the inner, whereto Moses referred, and that path lieth hid within the mother, and is the medium of its conjunction. When it is noted that Yod is identical with the lingam in the Hindu system, and that Kether, Diath, and the beautiful path, Tifereth, the 6th Sephirah, are in a line on the middle pillar of the tree, which equates with the spine in man, the microcosm, and that Kundalini is coiled in Yesod, also on the middle pillar. We shall see that we have here an important key for those who are equipped to use it. In the Greater Holy Assembly, verse 566, Mather's translation, we read concerning the head of microprosopos, whose whole body is being taken as a glyph of the cosmos. From the third cavity there goes forth 1,000 times 1,000 conclaves and assemblies, wherein doth knowledge is contained and dwelleth. And the hollow place of this cavity is between the other two cavities, and all these conclaves are filled from either side. This is that which is written in Proverbs, and in knowledge, Dath, shall the conclaves be filled, and those three are expanded over the whole body, on this side and on that, and with them does the whole body cohere, and the body is contained by them on every side, and through the whole body are they expanded and diffused. When it is recalled that death is situated at the point where the abyss bisects the middle pillar, and that up the middle pillar lies the path of the arrow, the way by which consciousness goes when the psychic rises on the planes, and that here also is Kundalini, we see that in death is the secret of both generation and regeneration, the key to the manifestation of all things through the differentiation into pairs of opposites and their union in a third. Thus doth the tree unfold its secrets to the Kabbalists. The second triangle upon the tree of life is formed of the Sephiroth, Chest, Geburah, and Tifereth. Chest is formed by the overflowing of Binah, and is situated in the right-hand pillar of mercy, immediately below Chokmah, the angle of the lightning flash, which is used to indicate the course of the emanations upon the tree, slopes downwards to the right across the glyph, from Binab at the head of the pillar of severity to Chest, which occupies the middle section of the pillar of mercy. Then the flash turns and goes horizontally across the glyph back again to the pillar of severity, in the middle section of which is found the Sepharab Gehorab. Down and to the right slopes once more the symbol of emanating force, and indicates the Sephira Tifereth, which occupies the very center of the tree and the pillar of mildness or equilibrium. These three Sephiroth constitute the next functional triangle we have to consider, and although we do not intend to go exhaustively into their symbolism until we have completed our schematic survey of the whole system, it is necessary to say enough to give some clue to their significance and enable them to be assigned to a place in the concept we are building up. This concept is so vast in its elaboration of detail that to attempt to teach it exhaustively from A to Z must end in confusion. Only gradually can it reveal its significance to the student as one aspect interprets another. My method of teaching the tree may not be ideal from the point of view of systematic thought, but I believe it is the only one which will enable the beginner to get the hang of the subject. It was upon the tree that I got my own mystical training, and I have lived and moved and had my being in its company for a good many years now. So I feel that I am competent to speak upon it from the point of view of practical mysticism, for I know from my own experience the difficulties of getting hold of the Kabbalistic system, so intricate, abstract, and voluminous, and yet so comprehensive and satisfactory when once it is mastered. Before we can consider the second triangle of the tree as a unit, we must know the meaning of its components Sephiroth. Chesed means mercy or love. It is also called Gedula, greatness or magnificence, and to it is assigned the sphere of the planet Jupiter. Geburah means strength. It is also called Pachad, fear. To it is assigned the sphere of the planet Mars. Tifereth means beauty, and to it is assigned the sphere of the sun. When the gods of the various pagan pantheons are being correlated with the spheres on the tree, it will be found that the sacrificed gods invariably come on to Tifereth, and for this reason it has been called the Christ Center in the Christian Kabbala. We now have sufficient material to make a survey of the second triangle. Jupiter, the beneficent ruler and lawgiver, is balanced by Mars the warrior, the fiery and destructive force, and the two are equilibrated in Tifereth, the Redeemer. In the supernal triangle, we see the primary Sephira emanating a pair of opposites which express the two sides of its nature, Chokmah, force, and Binab, form, masculine and feminine Sephiroth, respectively. In the second triangle, we have the pairs of opposites which find their equilibrium in a third, placed upon the middle pillar of the tree. From this we deduce that the first triangle derives its significance from that which lies behind it, and the second triangle derives its significance from that into which it issues forth. In the first triangle we find a representation of the creative forces of the substance of the universe. In the second we have a representation of the governing forces of evolving life. In chests is the wise and kindly king, the father of his people, organizing his realm, building up industry, fostering learning, and bringing the gifts of civilization. In Geburah we have a warrior king, leading his people in battle, defending his kingdom from the assaults of the enemy, extending his boundaries by conquest, punishing crime, and destroying evildoers. In Tifereth we have the Savior, sacrificed upon the cross for the salvation of his people, and thereby bringing Jabura into equilibrium with Gajula, or chest. Here we find the sphere of all the beneficent sun gods and healing gods. Thus we see that the mercies of Gajula and the severities of Jabura unite for the healing of the nations. Behind Tifereth, traversing the tree, is drawn Parakith, the veil of the temple, the analog, on a lower plane, of the abyss which separates the three supernals from the rest of the tree. Like the abyss, the veil marks a chasm in consciousness. The mode of mentation on one side of the chasm differs in kind from the mode of mentation prevailing upon the other. Tifereth is the highest sphere to which normal human consciousness can rise. When Philip said to our Lord, "Show us the Father," Jesus replied, "He that hath seen me hath seen the Father." All the human mind can know of Kether is its reflection in Tifereth, the Christ center, the sphere of the sun. Paraketh is the veil of the temple which was rent asunder at the crucifixion. We now come in our brief preliminary survey to the third triangle composed of the Sephiroth Netzach, Had, and Yesod. Netzach is the basal sephira of the pillar of mercy. Had is the basal sephira of the pillar of severity, and Yesod is upon the middle pillar of mildness or equilibrium, in direct alignment with Kether and Tifereth. Thus the third triangle is an exact replica of the second triangle upon a lower arc. The meaning of Netzach is victory, and to it is assigned the sphere of the planet Venus. The meaning of Had is glory, and to it is assigned the sphere of the planet Mercury. The meaning of Yesod is foundation, and to it is assigned the sphere of the moon. While the second triangle might not inaptly be termed the ethical triangle, the third may well be called the magical triangle. And if we assign together the sphere of the three-in-one, the undivided unity, and to Tifereth the sphere of the Redeemer or Son, we may be justified in referring to Yesod the sphere of the Holy Spirit. The Enlightener. This is an attribution of the Christian Trinity that fits better upon the tree than its assignation to the three supernals, which brings the Son in the place of Abba, the Father, and the Holy Spirit in the place of Amma, the Mother, and is obviously irrelevant and productive of innumerable discrepancies in the correspondences and symbolisms. In this, we see an example of the value of the tree as a method of counter-checking vision or meditation. Correct attributions fit upon the tree through endless ramifications of symbolism. As we saw when considering Bina as the mother, incorrect symbolism breaks down and reveals its bizarre associations at the first attempt to follow out a chain of correspondences. It is amazing what ramifications of association chains can be followed when the attribution is correct. It seems as if it were only the extent of our knowledge which limits the length of the chain that can be linked logically together. It will extend through science, art, mathematics, and the epochs of history, through ethics, psychology, and physiology. It was this peculiar method of using the mind which in all probability gave the ancients their premature knowledge of natural science, knowledge which has had to await the invention of instruments of precision for its confirmation. We get clues to this method in the dream analysis of analytical psychology. We might describe it as the symbol-using power of the subconscious mind. It is an instructive experiment to toss a mass of irrelevant symbolism into the mind and watch it sort itself out in meditation upon the tree, rising into consciousness in long association chains like dream analysis. Netzach is the sphere of the goddess of nature, Venus. Had is the sphere of Mercury, the Greek analog of the Egyptian Thoth, lord of books and learning. Observing their opposition, we shall expect to find two different aspects represented in them, these finding their equilibrium in a third, Yesod, the sphere of Luna. We see then a triangle composed of the Lady of Nature, the Lord of Books, and the Mistress of Witchcraft. In other words, subconsciousness and superconsciousness correlate in psychism. Anyone who is familiar with practical mysticism knows that there are three paths of superconsciousness devotional mysticism, which correlates with Tifereth, nature mysticism, of the inebriating Dionysian. Type, which equates with the Venus sphere of Netzach, and intellectual mysticism of the occult type, which equates with Hod, the sphere of Thoth, lord of magic. Tiferet, as will be seen by reference to the diagram of the tree, belongs to a higher plane than any member of the third triangle. Yesod, on the other hand, is drawing very near to the sphere of Earth. To Yesod are assigned all the deities that have the moon in their symbolism. Luna herself, Hecate with her dominion over evil magic, and Diana with her presidency over childbirth. The physical moon, Yesod in Asaya, as the Kabbalists would say, with its 28-day cycle, correlates with the reproductive cycle of the human female. If the symbolism of the lunar crescent be traced through the various pantheons, it will be found that the deities associated with it are predominantly female. It is interesting to note in confirmation of our assignation of the Holy Spirit to Yesod that according to MacGregor Mathers, the Holy Spirit is a feminine force. He says, "We are usually told that the Holy Spirit is masculine, but the word ruach, spirit, is feminine, as appears from the following passage of the Sefer Yetzirah. Akath, feminine, not Akkad, masculine. Ruach Elohim Chum, one is she, the spirit of the Elohim of life." When we consider the middle pillar as referring to levels of consciousness, we shall find further confirmation of this view. There remains for our final consideration the Sephirah Malkuth, the kingdom of earth. This Sephirah differs from the others in several respects. Firstly, it is not part of any equilibrated triangle, but is said to be the receptacle of the influences of all the others. Secondly, it is a fallen Sephirah, for it was cut off from the rest of the tree by the fall, and the coils of the stooping dragon arising from the world of shells, the kingdoms of unbalanced force, separated from its brethren. Behind the shoulder of the queen, the bride of Microprosopos Malkuth, the serpent rears his head, and here is said to be the place of severest judgments. The sphere of Malkuth abuts upon the hells of the averse Sephiroth, the Cliffoth, or evil demons. It is a firmament whereby Elohim separated the supernal waters of Bina from the infernal waters of Leviathan. The signification of the Cliffoth must be considered fully in due course, but having referred to them here in order to explain the position of Malkuth, we must say something further in order to render the explanation intelligible. The Cliffoth, singular Cliffa, an immodest woman or harlot, are the evil or averse Sephiroth, each an emanation of unbalanced force from its corresponding sphere upon the holy tree. These emanations took place during the critical periods of evolution when the Sephiroth were not in equilibrium. For this reason, they are referred to as the kings of unbalanced force, the kings of Edom, who ruled before there was a king in Israel, as the Bible puts it, and in the words of the Sefer Diniutha, the book of concealed mystery, for before there was equilibrium, countenance beheld, not countenance. And the kings of ancient time were dead, and their crowns were found no more, and the earth was desolate. We have now completed our preliminary survey of the Tree of Life, and the arrangement of the 10 holy Sephiroth thereon. We also have some clue to their significance, and have been given a hint or two of the manner in which the mind works when it uses these cosmic symbols for its meditations. Consequently, we are now in a position to assign each fresh bit of information to its correct position in our scheme. We are building up the jigsaw puzzle with a knowledge of the outlines of the picture. Crowley has aptly likened the tree to a card index file, in which each symbol is an envelope. This is a simile which it would be difficult to improve upon. In the course of our studies, we shall begin to fill these filing cases and to find the cross-indexing among them indicated by the appearance of the same symbol in other associations.
There are various methods by which the 10 holy Sephiroth can be grouped upon the Tree of Life. Of these, it cannot be said that one is correct and another incorrect. They serve different purposes and throw much light upon the meaning of the individual Sephiroth by revealing their associations and equilibrium. They are also of value because they enable the decimal system of the tree to be equated with the 3, 4, and 7-fold systems. The primary conformation of the tree is into 3 pillars. It will be observed by reference to the diagrams that the Sephiroth readily lend themselves to this 3-fold vertical division, for they are arranged in 3 columns. These are called the right-hand pillar of mercy, the left-hand pillar of severity, and the middle pillar of mildness or equilibrium. Before proceeding any further, we must make clear the significance of the right and left sides of the tree. As we look at the tree in the diagram, we see Bina, Geburah, and Hod upon the left side, and Chokmah, Chest, and Netzach upon the right side. This is the way we view the tree when we are using it to represent the macrocosm. But when we are using it to represent the microcosm, that is our own being, we, as it were, back into it, so that the middle pillar equates with the spine, and the pillar that contains Bina, Geburah, and Hod with the right side, and the pillar that contains Chokmah, Chesed, and Netzach with the left side. These 3 pillars can also be equated with the Shushumna, Ida, and Pingala of the yoga system. It is very important to remember the reversal of the tree when it is used as a subjective symbol, otherwise confusion results. In his valuable book, Upon the Literature of the Kabbalah, the Holy Kabalah, Mr. Waite, in the frontispiece, for some reason best known to himself, reverses the usual presentation of the tree. But it may be taken for granted that most representations of the symbol give the objective tree, not the subjective. When the tree is being used to indicate the lines of force in the aura, it is the subjective tree that must be used so that Geburah equates with the right arm. In all cases, of course, the middle pillar remains steadfast. The pillar of severity is considered to be negative or feminine, and the pillar of mercy to be positive or masculine. Superficially, it may be thought that these attributions lead to incompatible symbolism, but a study of the pillars in the light of what we now know concerning the individual Sephiroth will reveal that the incompatibilities are purely superficial and that the deeper significance of the symbolism is entirely consonant. It will be observed that the line which indicates the successive development of the Sephiroth zigzags from side to side of the glyph and has been aptly named the lightning flash in consequence. This indicates graphically that the Sephiroth are successively positive, negative, and equilibrated. This is a far better representation of the process of mystical Kabalah creation than if the spheres were represented one above another in a straight line, for it indicates the difference in the nature of the divine emanations and their relations to each other. For when we look at the glyph of the tree, we readily perceive the relations existing between the different Sephiroth and see how they group, reflect, and react upon each other. At the head of the pillar of severity, the negative feminine pillar is Bina, the Great Mother. Now to Bina is assigned the sphere of Saturn, and Saturn is the giver of form. At the head of the pillar of mercy is Chokmah, the supernal father, a male potency. Thus we see that we have here the apposition of form and force. In the second trinity, we have the apposition of Chesed, Jupiter, and Geburah, Mars. Again, we have the pairs of opposites of construction in Jupiter, the lawgiver and beneficent ruler, and destruction in Mars, the warrior and destroyer of evil. It may be asked why such a male potency as Geburah should be placed in the feminine pillar. It must be remembered that Mars is a destructive potency, one of the infortunes in astrology. The positive builds up, the negative breaks down. The positive is a kinetic force, the negative is a static force. These aspects appear again in Netzach at the base of the pillar of mercy and Hod at the base of the pillar of severity. Netzach is Venus, the green nature ray, elemental force, the initiation of the emotions. Hod is Mercury, Hermes, the initiation of knowledge. Netzach is instinct and emotion, a kinetic force. Hod is intellect, concrete thought, the reduction of intuitive knowledge to form. We must remember, however, that each sephira is negative, that is to say feminine, in relation to its predecessor, whence it emanates and whence it receives the divine influence, and positive, masculine or stimulating in respect of its successor, to whom it transmits the divine influence. Therefore, each sephira is bisexual, like a magnet of which one pole must of necessity be negative and the other positive. We may perhaps explain matters further by an analogy with astrology and say that a sephira in the feminine pillar is well dignified when it is functioning in its negative aspect and ill-dignified when functioning positively, and that in the masculine pillar the position is reversed. Thus, Binah Saturn is well dignified when providing stability and endurance, but ill-dignified when the overplus of resistance causes it to become actively aggressive, and we get obstruction and the accretion of effete matter. On the other hand, Chesed Mercy is well dignified when ordering and preserving all things harmoniously, but ill-dignified when mercy becomes sentimentality and it usurps the sphere of Saturn, preserving that which the fiery energy of Mars, its opposite number, the Sephira Gebura, should sweep out of existence. The two pillars, then, represent the positive, negative forces in nature, the active and passive, the destructive and constructive, concreting form and free-moving force. The Sephiroth on the middle pillar may be taken as representing levels of consciousness and the planes on which they operate. Malkuth is sensory consciousness. Yesod is astral psychism. Tifereth is illuminated consciousness, the highest aspect of the personality with which the individuality has coalesced. This is the condition which really constitutes initiation. It is the consciousness of the higher self brought through into the personality. It is a gleam of higher consciousness coming from behind the veil Paraketh. It is for this reason that the messiahs and saviors of the world are assigned to Tifereth in the symbolism of the tree, for they were the light bringers to humanity, and as all who bring fire from heaven must do, they died the sacrificial death for the sake of mankind. It is here too that we die to the lower self in order that we may rise in the higher self. The middle pillar rises through Darth. The invisible Sephira, which we have already seen, is knowledge according to the rabbis, and conscious awareness or apprehension according to the terminology of the psychologist. At the head of this pillar is Kether, the crown, and the root of all being. Consciousness, Theri, reaches from the spiritual essence of Kether through the realization of Darth, which carries it across the abyss, into the translated consciousness of Tifereth, whither it is brought by the sacrifice of the Christ, which rends the veil Paraketh. Then on into the psychic consciousness of Yesod, the sphere of the moon, and thence to the sensory brain consciousness of Malkuth. Thus does consciousness descend in the course of involution, which is the term applied to that phase of evolution which leads down from the first manifest through the subtle planes of existence to dense matter. The esotericist should, strictly speaking, only use the term evolution when describing the ascent from matter back to spirit, for then is evolved that which was involved in the descent through the subtle phases of development. It is obvious that nothing can be evolved, unfolded, which was not previously involved, unfolded. The actual course of evolution follows the track of the lightning flash or flaming sword, from Kether to Malkuth in the order of development of the Sephiroth previously described. But consciousness descends plane by plane and only begins to manifest when the polarizing Sephiroth are in equilibrium. Therefore, the modes of consciousness are assigned to the equilibrating Sephiroth upon the middle pillar, but the magical powers are assigned to the opposing Sephiroth, each at the end of the beam of the balance of the pairs of opposites. The way of initiation follows the coilings of the serpent of wisdom upon the tree, but the way of illumination follows the path of the arrow, which is shot from the bow of promise, Kesheth, the rainbow of astral colors that spreads like a halo behind Yesod. This is the way of the mystic, as distinguished from that of the occultist. It is swift and direct, and free from the danger of the temptation of unbalanced force that is met with in either pillar, but it confers no magical powers save those of sacrifice in Tifereth and psychism in Yesod. We have noted the three trinities of the tree in our preliminary discussion of the 10 Sephiroth. Let us recapitulate these again for clearness' sake. Mathers calls the first trinity of Kether, Chokmah, and Bina the intellectual world, the second trinity of Chesed, Geburah, and Tifereth the moral world, and the third trinity of Netzach, Hod, and Yesod the material world. To my way of thinking, this terminology is misleading, for these words do not connote in our minds what is meant by these worlds. The intellect is essentially a concreting of intuition and apprehension, and as such is an unsuitable term for the world of the three supernals. With the use of the term moral world for Chesed, Geburah, and Tifereth, I agree. It is identical with my term ethical triangle, but with the term material world for the trinity of Netzach, Hod, and Yesod, I emphatically disagree, for this term belongs exclusively to Malkuth. These three Sephiroth are not material but astral, and for this trinity I propose the term astral or magical world. It is not well to wrest words from their dictionary meaning, even if you define your use of them, and this Mathers has not troubled to do. The intellectual sphere is not so much a level as a pillar, for the intellect, being the content of consciousness, is essentially synthetic. These terms, however, are apparently taken from a somewhat crude translation of the Hebrew names given to the four levels into which the Kabbalists divide manifestation. These four levels permit of yet another grouping of the Sephiroth. The highest of these is Atziluth, the archetypal world, consisting of Kether. The second, Briar, called the creative world, consists of Chokmah and Binab, the supernal Abba and Amma, father and mother. The third level is that of Yetzirah, the formative world, consisting of the six central Sephiroth, Vizun Chesed, Geburah, Tifereth, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. The fourth world is Asaya, the material world, represented by Malkuth. The 10 Sephiroth are also conformed into 7 palaces. In the first palace are the 3 supernals. In the 7th palace are Yesod and Malkuth, and the rest of the Sephiroth each has a palace to itself. The grouping is of interest as revealing the intimate relationship of Yesod and Mal-Tilda-Ovieth, and enabling the 10-fold scale of the Kabbalah to be equated with the 7-fold scale of Theosophy. There is also a 3-fold division of the Sephiroth, which is very important in Kabbalistic symbolism. In this system, Kether is given the title of Arik Anpin, the vast countenance. This is manifested as Abba, the supernal father, Chokmah, and Amma, the supernal mother, Binab, these being the positive and negative aspects of the 3 in 1. These 2 differentiated aspects, when united, are, according to Mathers, Elohim, that curious divine name, which is a feminine noun with a masculine plural attached to it. This union takes place in Dath, the invisible Sepharab. The next 6 Sephiroth are conformed into Zaur Anpin, the lesser countenance, or Microprosopos, whose special Sephirah is Tifereth. The remaining Sepharab, Malkuth, is called the bride of Microprosopos. Microprosopos is also sometimes called the king. Malkuth is then called the queen. She is also called the lesser mother, or terrestrial Eve, as distinguished from Bina, the supernal mother. These different methods of classifying the Sephiroth are not competing systems, but are designed to enable the decimal system of the Kabbalists to be equated with other systems, using a threefold notation, such as the Christian, or as we have already noted, a sevenfold system like Theosophy. They are also valuable as indicating functional affiliations among the Sephiroth themselves. The final system of classification, which we must note, is under the presidency of the three mother letters of the Hebrew alphabet: Aleph, Mem, M, and Shin, Shish. These three, according to the Yetziratic attribution of the Hebrew alphabet, are assigned to the three elements of air, water, and fire. Under the presidency of Aleph is the airy triad of Kether, in which is the root of air, reflecting downward through Tifereth, the solar fire, into Yesod, the lunar radiance. In Benali is the root of water, Mara, the great sea, reflected through Chesed into Hod, under the presidency of Mem, the mother of water. In Chokmah is the root of fire, reflected downwards through Geburah into Netzach, under the presidency of Shin, the mother of fire. These groupings must be borne in mind, for they aid greatly in understanding the significance of individual Sephiroth. For, as we have already pointed out in various connections, a Sephira is best interpreted by its affiliations. We have already noted the division of the Sephiroth into the four worlds of the Kabbalists, for this is one of the methods of classification much employed in Kabbalistic thought and of great value when studying evolution. We must remember, however, that the tree is not an arbitrary method of classification, and because a thing is classified under one head in one system, it does not mean that it cannot equally properly be classified under another head in another system. The reappearance of the same symbol in a different sphere often affords valuable clues. Under another method of classification, the 10 holy Sephiroth are considered as appearing in each Kabbalistic world upon another arc or level of manifestation, so that just as Amsof Aur, the limitless light of the unmanifest, concentrated a point, which was Kether, and the emanations worked down through increasing grades of density to Malkuth, so the Malkuth of Atziluth is conceived of as giving rise to the Kether of Briar, and so on consecutively down the planes, the Malkuth of Briar giving rise to the Kether of Yetzirah, the Malkuth of Yetzirah giving rise to the Kether of Asaya, and the Malkuth of Asaya in its lowest aspect abutting upon the Kliphoth. It is Atziluth, however, which is considered the natural sphere of the Sephiroth as such, and for this reason it is called the world of emanations. It is here, and here only, that God acts directly and not through his ministers. In Briar he acts through the mediation of the archangels, in Yetzirah through the angelic orders, and in Asaya through those centers which I have named the mundane chakras, the planets, elements, and signs of the zodiac. We have then, in these four sets of symbols, a complete system of notation for expressing the mode of function of any given power at any given level, and this system of notation is the basis of ceremonial magic with its names of power, and also of talismanic magic and the tarot system of divination. It is for this reason that it is said of the barbarous names of evocation that not so much as a letter may be changed, for these names are formulae based on the Hebrew alphabet, which is the sacred language of the West, as Sanskrit is the sacred language of the East. In Hebrew, moreover, each letter is also a number, so the names are numerical formulae. A most intricate system of metaphysical mathematics called gematria is based on this principle. There are aspects of gematria which I, at the present stage of my knowledge at any rate, consider debased and idle, being the accretions of superstition. But the basic idea of the system of cosmic mathematics unquestionably enshrines great truths and contains great possibilities. Using this system, it is possible to unravel the relationships of all manner of cosmic factors if the correct Hebrew spelling of the names of power is known, for these names were formulated in accordance with the principles of gematria, and therefore gematria supplies the key to them. But this aspect of our subject, fascinating as it is, we cannot enter upon now. In the archetypal world of Atziluth, there are assigned to the 10 Sephiroth 10 forms of the divine name. Anyone who has read the Bible cannot fail to have observed that God is referred to under diverse titles, as the Lord God, as the Father, and by several other appellations. Now, these are not literary devices to avoid needless repetition, but are exact metaphysical terms, and according to the name used, we know the aspect of divine force in question and the plane on which it is functioning. In the world of Briar, it is held that the mighty archangels carry out the mandates of God and give them expression, and assigned to the Sephirothic spheres on the tree in this world are the names of these 10 mighty spirits. In Yetzirah, it is the choirs of angels, innumerable in their concourse, who carry out the divine commands, and these also are assigned to their Sephirothic spheres, thus enabling us to know their mode and level of function. In Asya, as we have already noted, certain natural centers of force are given similar correspondences. We will consider all these associations when we come to study the Sephiroth in detail. In the symbolic rendering of the 10 holy Sephiroth in the 4 worlds, there is another important set of factors to be considered, and these are the 4 color scales classified by Crowley as the King scale, assigned to the Atziluthic world, the Queen scale, assigned to the Briatic world, the Emperor scale, assigned to the Yetziratic world, and the Empress scale, assigned to the Asiatic world. This 4-fold classification has a far-reaching significance in all Kabbalistic matters and also in Western magic, which is largely based upon the Kabbalah. It is said to be under the presidency of the 4 letters of Tetragrammaton, the sacred name popularly rendered as Jehovah. In Hebrew, which has no vowels in its alphabet, this word is spelt JHVH, or according to the Hebrew names of these letters, Yod, He, Vav, He. The vowels are indicated in Hebrew by points inserted in and under the square letters of the script, which is written from right to left. These vowel points were only introduced at a comparatively recent date, and the older Hebrew scripts are unpointed, so that the reader cannot see the pronunciation of any proper name for himself, but needs to have it communicated to him by someone who knows it. The true mystical pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton is said to be one of the arcana of the mysteries. To the 4 letters of the name are allotted any 4-fold mystical classification, and by means of their correspondences, we can trace all manner of relationships, and these are very important in practical occultism, as will be seen later. 4 important 4-fold divisions find a place under them, thus enabling us to see their relationships among themselves. These are the 4 worlds of the Kabbalists, the 4 elements of the alchemists, the 4-fold classification of the signs of the zodiac, and the planets into triplicities employed by the astrologers, and the 4 suits of the tarot pack used in divination. This 4-fold classification resembles the Rosetta Stone, which gave the key to the Egyptian hieroglyphs, for on it were inscriptions in Egyptian and Greek. Greek being known, it was possible to work out the meaning of the corresponding Egyptian hieroglyphs. It is the method of arranging all these sets of factors on the tree which gives the real esoteric clue to each of these systems of practical occultism. Without this key, they have no philosophical basis and become matters of rule of thumb and superstition. It is for this reason that the initiated occultist will have nothing to do with the uninitiated fortune teller, for he knows that lacking this key, his system is valueless. Hence, the vital importance of the tree in Western occultism. It is our basis, our standard of measurement, and our textbook. To understand a Sephira, then, We need to know firstly its primary correspondences in the four worlds, its secondary correspondences in the four systems of practical occultism mentioned above, and thirdly, any other correspondences we can by any means gather together in order that the testimony of many witnesses may yield the truth. Of this gathering of correspondences, there can be no end, for the whole cosmos on all its planes corresponds in endless sequences. We are constantly adding to our knowledge if we are good students of occult science. No better symbol than that of the card index system could possibly have been found. But yet again, we must remind the reader in this connection that the Kabbalah is as much a method of using the mind as a system of knowledge. If we have the knowledge without having acquired the Kabbalistic technique of mentation, it is of little use to us. In fact, we might go so far as to say that it is not possible to acquire any great degree of knowledge until this technique of the mind has been mastered. For it is not the conscious mind to which the tree appeals, but subconsciousness. For the logical method of the Kabbalah is the logical method of dream association. But in the case of the Kabbalah, the dreamer is the racial subconsciousness, the oversoul of the peoples, the earth spirit. Into communion with this earth soul, the adept enters by means of meditation on the prescribed symbols. This is the real import of the tree and its correspondences. The highest of the four worlds, Absoluth, the plane of pure deity, is called by the Kabbalists the archetypal world. It is also called, in the somewhat clumsy translation of MacGregor Mathers, the intellectual world. This term is misleading. It is only intellectual as we commonly understand the word as relating to the mind, the rational intellect, insofar as it is the realm of archetypal ideas. But these ideas are entirely abstract and are conceived by a function of consciousness quite outside the range of mind as we know it. Therefore, to call this level the intellectual world is to mislead the reader, unless at the same time we say that by intellect we mean something quite different to what the dictionary means. This is a poor way of expressing our ideas. It is far better to coin a new term with a precise meaning than to use an old one in a misleading sense, especially as, in the case of Absoluth, there is an excellent term already current, the term archetypal, which exactly describes it. The Absoluthic world is said by the Kabbalists to be under the presidency of the Yod, of the sacred name of Tetragrammaton. We may justly deduce from this that in any other fourfold system, whatever is said to be also under the presidency of Yod will refer to the Absoluthic or purely spiritual aspect of that force or subject. Among other associations given by different authorities are the wands suit of the tarot pack and the element of fire. It will be apparent to anyone who has any knowledge of occult matters that as soon as we know the element to which a symbol is assigned, we know a good deal, for it opens up all the ramifications of astrology for us, and we can trace out its astrological affinities through the triplicities of the zodiac and the affinities of the planets with them. As soon as we know what zodiacal and planetary associations exist, we are in a position to explore the correlated symbolism of any pantheon, for all the gods and goddesses of the systems that the human mind has ever invented have astrological associations. The stories of their adventures are really parables of the workings of cosmic forces. Through this maze of symbolism, we could never hope to find our way unaided. But if we anchor the end of each chain of correspondences to its Sapphira, we have the clue we need. All systems of esoteric thought, as well as all popular theologies, attribute the construction and presidency of the different parts of the manifested universe to the mediation of intelligent and purposive beings working under the instruction of deity. Modern thought has tried to escape from the implications of this concept by reducing manifestation to a matter of mechanics. It has not succeeded, and there are signs that it is not far from the point when it will perceive mind as being at the root of form. The concepts of the ancient wisdom may be crude from the standpoint of modern philosophy, but we are forced to admit that the causative force behind manifestation is more akin in its nature to mind than to matter. To go a step further and personify the different types of force is a legitimate analogy, provided we realize that the entity which is the soul of the force may differ as much in kind and degree from our minds as our bodies differ in type and scale from the bodies of the planets. We shall be nearer an understanding of nature if we look for mind in the background than if we refuse to admit that the visible universe has an invisible framework. The ether of the physicists is closer akin to mind than to matter. Time and space, as understood by the modern philosopher, are more like modes of consciousness than linear measures. The initiates of the ancient wisdom made no bones about their philosophy. They took each factor in nature and personified it, gave it a name, and built up a symbolic figure to represent it, just as British artists have, by their collective efforts, produced a standard Britannia, a female figure with shield charged with the Union Jack, a lion at her feet, a trident in her hand, a helmet on her head, and the sea in the background. Analyzing this figure as we would a Kabbalistic symbol, we realize that these individual symbols in the complex glyph have each a significance. The various crosses which make up the Union Jack refer to the 4 races united in the United Kingdom. The helmet is that of Minerva, the trident is that of Neptune. The lion would need a chapter to himself to elucidate his symbolism. In fact, an occult glyph is more akin to a coat of arms than anything else, and the person who builds up a glyph goes to work in the same way as a herald designing a coat of arms. For in heraldry, every symbol has its exact meaning, and these are combined into the coat of arms that represents the family and affiliations of the man who bears it and tells us his station in life. A magical figure is the coat of arms of the force it represents. These magical figures are built up to represent the different modes of the manifestation of cosmic force in its different types and on its different levels. They are given names, and the initiate thinks of them as persons, not troubling himself about their metaphysical foundations. Consequently, for all practical purposes, they are persons. For whatever they may be in actual fact, they have been personalized, and thought forms have been built up on the astral plane to represent them. These, being charged with force, are of the nature of artificial elementals. But the force with which they are charged being cosmic, they are much more than what we ordinarily imply when we speak of artificial elementals, and we assign them to the angelic kingdom and call them angels or archangels according to their grade. An angelic being, then, may be defined as a cosmic force whose apparent vehicle of manifestation to psychic consciousness is a form built up by the human imagination. In practical occultism, these forms are built up with great care and the most elaborate attention to the details of the symbolism and are used to evoke the force required. Anyone who has had experience of their use will agree that they are peculiarly effectual for the purposes for which they are designed. By holding the magical image in it and vibrating the traditional name assigned thereto, remarkable phenomena are obtained. As we have already noted, it is necessary to use the ardential technique of the Kabbalists in order to get any sense out of the Kabbalah. This formulation of the image and vibration of the name is designed to put the student in touch with the forces behind each sphere of the tree, and when he comes into touch in this way, his consciousness is illuminated and his nature energized by the force thus contacted, and he obtains remarkable illuminations from his contemplation of the symbols. These illuminations are not a generalized flooding of light, as in the case of the Christian mystic, but a specific energizing and illumination according to the sphere opened up. Hod gives understanding of sciences, Yesod understanding of life force and its tidal modes of functioning. When Hod is contacted, we become filled with enthusiasm and energy for research. When Yesod is contacted, we enter deeply into psychic consciousness and touch the hidden life forces of the earth and our own natures. These are matters of experience. Those who have used the method know what it yields them. Whatever may be the rational foundations of the system, as an empirical method, it yields results. If we want to study a Sephira, in other words, if we want to investigate the aspect of nature to which it refers, we not only study it intellectually and imitate upon it, but we try to get into psychic and intuitive touch with its influence and sphere. In order to accomplish this, we always start at the top and try to get into spiritual touch with the aspect of deity which emanated that sphere and manifests in it. If this is not done, the forces belonging to the sphere on the elemental levels may get out of hand and cause difficulties. Starting under the presidency of the divine name, however, no evil can enter. Having adored the creator and sustainer of all under his holy name in the sphere we are investigating, we next invoke the archangel of the sphere, the mighty spiritual being in whom we personify the forces that built up that level of evolution and continue to function in the corresponding aspect of nature. We ask the blessing of the archangel and beg that he will bid the order of angels assigned to that sphere that they shall be friendly and helpful towards us in the realm of nature in which they function. By the time we have done this, we shall be thoroughly tuned to the keynote of the sphere we are investigating and be ready to follow out the ramifications of the correspondences of that Sephira and its cognate symbols. Approached in this way, we shall find the association tilde chains far richer in symbolism than we have ever believed to be possible, for the subconscious mind has been stirred and one of its many chambers of imagery thrown open to the exclusion of all the others. The association chains that rise into consciousness should therefore be free from any admixture of extraneous ideas and true to type. First, we review in our minds all the possible symbols that we can recollect, and as these present themselves to consciousness, we try and see their import and bearing upon the secrets of the sphere under investigation. But we do not try too hard, for if we concentrate upon a symbol and strain at it, as it were, we shall close the meshes of the tenuous veil that shields the subconscious mind. In these investigations, half meditation, half reverie, we want to work on the borders of consciousness and subconsciousness so as to induce that which is subconscious to cross the threshold and come within our reach. As we proceed thus, following out the ramifications of the association chains, we shall find that a running comment of intuition accompanies the process, and after the experiment has been repeated 2 or 3 times, we shall feel that we know that Sephira in a peculiarly intimate way, that we feel at home there, that the feel of it is quite different to that of the other Sephiroth which we have not yet worked with. We shall also find that some Sephiroth are more congenial to us than others, and that we get better results when working with them than we do with the uncongenial ones, where the associations chains keep on breaking and the doors of subconsciousness resolutely refuse to open to our knocking. One pupil of mine could do excellent meditations on Bina Saturn and Tifereth, the Redeemer, but did not get on at all well with Gebura Severity Mars. I shall never forget my own experience with the first attempt I made at this method. I was working on the 32nd path, the path of Saturn, uniting Malkuth and Yesod, a very difficult and treacherous path. In my horoscope, Saturn is not well aspected, and I have often experienced his opposing influence in my affairs. But after I had succeeded in treading the path of Saturn out into the indigo darkness of the unseen until the moon of Yesod rose in purple and silver over the horizon, I felt that I had received the initiation of Saturn, that he was no longer inimical to me, but a friend who, though candid and stern, was to be trusted to protect me from mistakes and rash judgments. I realized his function as the tester and not the antagonist or avenger. I realized him as time with his scythe, but knew also why he was called in Hebrew Shabbathal rest, for he giveth his beloved sleep. After that, the 32nd path was open to me, not only on the tree, but in life, for the forces and problems symbolized by that path and its correspondences had become harmonized in my soul. From these two brief examples, it will be seen that the meditations upon the tree form a most practical and exact system of mystical development, and one that is peculiarly valuable in that it is equilibrated, for the different aspects of manifestation are, as it were, dissected out and dealt with in turn, nothing being neglected. By the time we have trodden all the paths of the tree, we shall have learnt the lessons of death and the devil, as well as of the angel and the high priest.